Hello and welcome back to another episode of Insurance Tomorrow. I'm Vanessa Baffoe. Now today we'll be looking at cyber risks. Now this is a topic that's becoming more important than ever. And we'll be looking at how small businesses can protect themselves in our increasingly digital world. Well, joining me today is Delvin Tillett, who's head of cyber at Allianz Commercial, and also Jake Moore, who's global cybersecurity advisor at ESET. And they'll be sharing everything they know about cyber risks, as well as offering practical tips to help small businesses to stay safe. We'll also be discussing how brokers can lend a helping hand to their clients. And of course, we'll be looking ahead to the future. And the big questions really here are, what's on the horizon for cybersecurity? And crucially, how can brokers help their clients to stay one step ahead in this ever-changing landscape? It's great to have both of you here. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us here on Insurance Tomorrow. Now, most people will be aware of the high-profile cyber attack that's been on Marks and Spencer, the Co-op, Harrods. Let's go back to basics. How do you define a cyber attack?
Yeah, so I'd say there is a deliberate act to disrupt or to steal from a business using technology. And we see this in many different forms. But if we look at the basics, say, regarding motivation, the most common motivating factor would be for financial gain. So the majority of businesses that we're, say, talking about today will be dealing with attackers that are focusing on stealing money from them. And that can come in different ways. Of course, they might use extortion to try and, say, leverage that motivating factor in those demands, such as ransomware. But really, it could be any form at all. And that could be any form of disruption.
Goodness, all of this is actually quite scary, isn't it?
Yeah. Cyber attacks come in many different forms, but the typical attack will usually be from, a nefarious threat actor that's looking to infiltrate a company's computer system to steal data, or to then, interlock systems with ransomware to stop them being able to operate in order to extort them for money.
So, Delvin, what does the current cyber threat landscape look like?
Well, it's very complicated. I think things are changing rapidly. I think one thing with cyber is that it's constantly moving. There's lots of different threat actors out there at the moment, and they're all using different techniques, and those techniques develop. I think there's people like Lockbit who were taken down by law enforcement, but then sometimes, it's like slaying the Hydra, the head bumps up again somewhere else. So it's constantly evolving, whether it's for, hacktivist reasons, for financial gain. It's a very kind of moving landscape all the time. And that's why it's really important for companies to understand, their position on cyber and have a cyber strategy so that they're, readily prepared to act in the event that they're, targeted.
That's a very interesting point there that you say cyber strategy there. Jake, what's your point on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a monumental time. We are seeing a time that we've never experienced before. We always expected that criminals would get more sophisticated. We've been listening to that theory for many years. But the fact is now they've got so many tools at their disposal. They've got scale at their disposal with the likes of huge amounts of data, algorithms incorporated with AI to process that data. They're able to run so far away. If we want to, say, use the cat and mouse analogy, they are the mouse that has run so far, and we are left as the cat further away than we've ever been before. So we can't just sit still. We've got to continue to run after that mouse and protect where we can, and to spend more money. Unfortunately, many people won't want to hear that, but we need to keep putting money into those resources to protect and mitigate, because it's inevitable that criminals will continue to relentlessly target us.
And Delvin, what's the significance of these incidents, particularly on small, medium enterprises, but also what role does insurance play here?
Well, that's the thing. These cyber attacks can be, pretty damaging, and it can actually impact the survival of an organisation. And we've seen that in the past, where organisations are not able to operate any further because the incident has been so severe that they don't have the resources to be able to deal with it, so they actually go out of business. And where cyber insurance comes in is that cyber insurance is there as a backstop to help those organisations, especially in the SME space, where cyber insurance policies also kind of assist with their incident response plans, because cyber policies will typically come with vendors. So carriers will work with vendors, and they'll have agreed rates so that they get, you don't want to be in the middle of an incident and then have to engage a vendor and get charged double. So carriers will partner with vendors to have rates already agreed so that you can have somebody come in that's able to look at your systems, get the baddies out. They're able to help you with adjusting your BI loss, because cyber policies will look to cover the business interruption that's taken place as a result of that incident. And that can be quite a complex situation when you start looking at things like accounting principles versus insurance accounting principles. There can be subtle differences which could make a difference in putting together your claim for that business interruption loss. So as well as providing that backstop, they're also a risk management tool for organisations to fall upon that may not have those internal resources themselves to deal with those kinds of situations.
And Jake, what's your take on this? Because I'm thinking just a few years ago, cyber wasn't even a topic that we would even be discussing, and yet here we are today.
Yeah, it used to be discussed by particularly IT departments, probably banging on the decision maker's door saying, come on, we need more money here, we need better protection. But it's slowly got into the mindsets of everyone. It's everyone's decision to make sure that they are protecting the business that they're in. But SMEs are unfortunately targeted primarily because they might not have those extra protections in place. And I think we need to be reminding everyone across the board that they need to have as many different levels of protection that is possible. It's not just the fact that they are so small, they won't get affected. Of course, they should be. So if we're looking at things like insurance, we know that there's a law for having insurance if you are driving a car down the street. But the fact that not all businesses, so we know that it's not 100% yet, that are using cyber insurance is astounding. It just reminds us, it highlights the fact that there are so many companies thinking, we don't need that. They're not even able to think that it's a worry, or they're thinking it's too expensive. But it's always going to be more expensive if they get attacked. And I say if, that's a small if. It's an inevitable. So unfortunately, it's just one of those extra pillars they're going to have to add to their business.
And on that topic, do you know what I find really interesting? I mean, there's some government stats here. So 43% of businesses reported a cybersecurity breach or attack in the last 12 months. But wait for this, only 45% of businesses reported being insured against cybersecurity risks in some way. That's astonishing.
Yeah, and do you know what? If you're saying that only 43% have announced it, I'd say it was way higher than that. I mean, we even know that it's a lot higher. The fact that they're only, say, admitting it, a lot of these companies will only admit it if they have to. So if, say, personally identifiable information has been stolen, then they have to go and tell the ICO within 72 hours. They don't always want to announce it because they are worried about share price. They're worried about trust. We know that, say, the retail industry, that was a massive blow to them. I don't think it will affect trust long term with such, say, stalwarts of the retail industry. Someone like Marks and Spencer's, for example, has got a big enough name to continue their power in the future. But there are so many companies that might not be so well known, and they don't want to be attributed to being known as a cyber attack, or that's the one that lost all our data. Effectively, everyone's getting attacked. We know that. But some people are just unfortunate. And I don't think there's that much blame even there as well. I don't think we should always be pointing the finger at a company because they have to protect all cyber attacks, but attackers only have to get through one time. And if they're able to get through one time, however they did it, however creative they were, and my goodness, they are so creative these days, if they get in and steal that data, we need to be able to protect it once that horse has bolted. And that's why this, say, holistic approach of, say, protecting beforehand and then ensuring afterwards, that seems to be a better form of glue.
Now, Delvin, criminals are very capable of causing significant harm to businesses. So one of the things that I'm really keen to know is what's the primary motivation of doing this? But also, what kinds of businesses are often targeted?
Well, it really depends on the industry sector, the type of information that's being held and how valuable that is to the criminal, because a lot of the time what the threat actors are looking for is financial gain. That's one of the primary motivations for them. They want to get as much data as they can, extort the person for it or the business for it so that they can get that money. So it really depends on the industry sector. If you're looking at something like healthcare, where there's really significant, personally sensitive data, that can create a lot of demand from threat actors to try and get that data and extort those type of businesses, but also, companies that may be perceived to have a lot more money on the go.
And Jake, I'll throw this same question to you. What kinds of businesses are often targeted?
I mean, every industry, it really is a target. The fact is they're getting so creative means that no industry can really hide from these attackers. We sometimes find that different groups that are, say, based in different parts of the world might go for, the healthcare industry or the retail industry. And so it's often difficult to, say, pick out industries. And I also don't like to pick on those because it might mean that others think that they're, say, safer right now, because it's also ever changing. We know that. The landscape is always going to change and evolve. It means that they're going to follow the money. And so if there are companies out there that, say, are unaware of their update process, for example, companies that haven't quickly updated to the latest patch that has been offered by, let's say, Microsoft, if there's that small gap in that window where they are vulnerable, it doesn't matter what industry they're in, that's when they're going to strike.
You see, a lot of brokers will be sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, how do they even target, companies' IT systems?
Oh, they're able to monitor that. It's very simple to know what system they're using. For example, we use this in marketing, let's say SEO, search engine optimization. It's really useful for a marketeer to know what device you are coming into their website on. So whether they're on a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop, and knowing the screen size, for example, because it then knows how to format the advert that's on there, and the colors that are used and which format's being used. So that's information that is really important to make it work and to make it look like it should do. Because a website on your mobile phone also needs to know that it's on a mobile, but then you go to the laptop and all the dimensions change. We don't think about that as users, but they need to know that information. That's also the information that can be scraped by criminals and taken advantage of. If they can then work out, just a minute, they're using certain, say, operating systems, or this is when they are updating their systems, any sort of data that can be found, it might seem trivial. It's not something that a criminal is going to, say, steal. It doesn't really matter. But if they are able to take advantage of that and abuse that and know that they've created some malware that deploys on that device and will strike at the time when they haven't patched it with that update, then that's what's going to take them out. So this is a data currency time that we're living in. And that information might seem really boring to the majority, but to a criminal, that can be the difference between no money and no ransom and millions of pounds in a ransom.
See, listening to you, I'm actually thinking, my goodness, it looks as though it could be quite easy for criminals to actually hack companies a lot more than a lot of people would actually think.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why, cyber hygiene is really important. It's an important topic for organizations to think about resiliency towards these threats and having things in place that kind of, bring up the drawbridge basically to protect their systems, protect the data that they have. And that comes down to things like segmentation of networks, how they're protecting access to data, how they're inventorying their assets that's in their environment, so they know what they've got and they know what they can protect as well.
So just listening to you as well, Delvin, I'm thinking, look, you can sit there and think, I can try my best and hope to be protected. There are things I can do. But once the criminals are in, they're in. And the only thing that can really save you is that insurance.
Well, it's insurance is kind of should be like the backstop. I think it's good for organisations to be thinking of insurance as the backstop and shoring up themselves. Absolutely. To make sure that they've got the controls in place already, so that the insurance is the backstop, but then they're able to respond, because that's the key part when these things happen, which we've seen here. It will. It's not if, it's when. And when they do, can they respond? Do they have the resources internally to be able to look at that? And there's mitigating factors that they can take to prevent that incident from being greater than what it would be had they not taken those steps. And then the insurance comes in afterwards as a backstop, because look, they've done everything they could. This is the end of the world type situation, but we've got our insurance policy there to fall back on, and we've got that additional protection.
And Jake, I can see you want to get in.
I mean, it's just great to hear Delvin say that. It really is. What you're saying is absolutely right. I mean, only a few years ago, I was speaking to people who had the argument that, well, we don't need insurance if we've got the protection in place. So they kept saying, well, we've got all this here that means no one's going to get through, so why have something that you're paying for that won't ever get needed or required? But of course it is a backstop, and we've got to assess that risk, and that's what's so important here. And once we do understand there is that risk, whatever percentage that is, for whatever size business that is, it's always going to be a part of this going forward picture that we are creating. And so if we're looking at only 45% of companies showing that they've got it, I can see that just increasing year on year. I'm hoping that we get up to at least the 90% soon. And I think the more people that talk about it, the more people understand it. But what I love about it is it can be bespoke for those businesses. So it's not a one size fits all. I think the best approach for an SME is to go in there and work out where their liabilities are, where their vulnerabilities are, what their data is worth. Don't pay for the full package. I don't want to see too many companies offering to pay a ransom, for example, if something happens. Make sure they have a backup system in place, and then they won't need to pay for that ransom. So bespoke it, understand it, and then actually it will make your business a lot better.
And I think, that misconception as well, I've got an insurance policy, I don't have to do anything, I'm covered. And I think that's really a role of a broker to be able to explain to the clients, the residual risk, because an insurance policy is just that. It has terms and conditions. There's things that come into play which may grant or actually take away cover. So being able to understand that residual risk for the business as well is really important.
And so, Delvin, with all of that being said, and with all of that being taken into consideration, how then can businesses, particularly small, medium enterprises, address any weaknesses?
I think it's going back to what we're saying in terms of that cyber hygiene, looking at their digital footprint, what data do we have? How sensitive is that data? What does the regulatory environment say? How do we protect that? And then looking at the resources that they have in order to put those mitigations in place, I think is probably the first step that organisations would take.
Jake, what's your take on this?
Yeah, this is the boring bit, but it's policy and procedure.
We love boring because it's practical and it's great and it's useful.
Do you know what? It starts with policy and procedure, but it does get more exciting. I'm a big fan of simulation attacks. So creating a cyber attack in a safe environment by a third party will highlight all of those issues. And inevitably, these experienced simulation attackers will get through those defenses. They will most likely be able to steal data and prove to those decision makers how important these defenses are moving forward. It will then mitigate those vulnerabilities at that time in that place and time. It's a moving landscape, as we've said. It changes 6 months, a year down the line. So it's something that needs to continue for all those companies. It's actually quite exciting to be part of a simulation attack. So in some cases, we're calling it penetration testing, when we are properly testing the protection in those companies. And if they are able to get through, which they will, you then patch those areas and you realise going forward, you're much better, but it's in a safe environment. So go and have some fun.
Yeah. I can see you shaking your head there frantically, Delvin. You want to get in?
Well, because insurance also helps on that respect as well, because a lot of carriers and Allianz ourselves, we partner with vendors on the pre-breach services. So this is helping organisations understand what their risk landscape looks like. So we will actually provide help to organisations via a vendor panel that will go in and do things in terms of tabletop exercises. So we'll be able to reimburse them for those exercises. So that's kind of helping understand what their risk looks like, and that makes them a better risk from an insurance perspective as well.
So, Delvin, what are the key considerations that brokers need to keep in mind when it comes to advising their clients on cyber risks?
I think it's really important for brokers to understand their client's business, because that's going to determine the scope of cover that their client will need. So I think that's one of the key considerations. Also understanding the client's digital footprint, the type of information that they're collecting, and what their cyber maturity is. Because if you understand the organisation's cyber maturity, you're able to broker that client to the insurance carrier and obviously try to improve terms for them.
Here's what I think a lot of people will also be thinking and also be looking at, right? how can you as a broker then add any form of value to your clients when it comes to advising them, and also when it comes to those risks that are not immediately obvious?
Okay. So part of what I do is to try and predict future crime. I'm fascinated with what criminals are doing today, but even more so, what are they doing tomorrow? And I think if brokers are able to make that penny drop with their clients, to make them really understand the true risk that's out there from attackers, that's when they start to work together. So if you're looking into the future, I would talk a lot about AI. Of course, that's going to be part of the future. We're already seeing it in attacks now. It's just, say, scaled what criminals have been able to do for many years, right the way back from, say, original scams that weren't even part of the internet. The internet elevated it, and now AI has tenfold elevated it once again. For example, taking advantage of something like Copilot, Microsoft's AI within Windows, we're able to now see new styles of phishing attacks that we'd not seen before. For example, there was recently an attack that has been patched now where a criminal has been able to send an email with a prompt for its Copilot hidden within the email, that when it is sent to the victim, if the victim just opens up that email and does nothing, no clicking, but just opens the email, it is able to inject that prompt into the victim's Copilot and do what it wants. And in this case, it was able to then highlight all the files that it wanted, let's say the desktop, and upload them to the website it's told it to, because it enters it within the Copilot itself. So it's not replying with it, it's not sending it out via an email. So it's bypassing all of the protections that we've got in place, the firewalls that would say, whoa, you can't be sending that out. It was diverting away from that into a more, let's say, very creative use of AI. And we've seen prompt injections like this before in ways that have not used AI. But the fact it's using the victim's AI tool that is just sitting there wanting to be used, I think is fascinating.
Alarm bells are ringing as you're saying this. I cannot believe
Good.
how
That's what we
easy
want.
it could be. Yeah, this is it's staggering, isn't it? When you think about it, Delvin.
It really is, and I think what we're seeing with certain threat actor groups and how they're using AI, it's in terms of deep fakes, they're able to take people's voices and use them for their own purposes to socially engineer their way into organizations. I mean, it's quite scary stuff when you think about it.
Now, look, still sticking with the theme of looking ahead, what emerging cyber risks should brokers be aware of?
Yeah, it's really thinking outside the box. And that's why I'm looking into, say, this future crime, because how are we able to use AI in the future for good? You've always got to balance that with how a criminal is using it for bad. And so deepfakes has actually got a really positive spin on it. Say people want to create podcasts but might not feel comfortable speaking into a microphone. You can now do that with your own voice. But of course, criminals are able to abuse that for their own advantage. So it's also difficult to, say, make people really accept that until it's happened to them. And that's why it's about bringing in these simulation attacks, because only then do they get that feeling in their stomach of, wow, you really did get past our securities, which we thought were pretty good. And it really highlights it to them. So again, it comes back to that bespoke package with insurance, with simulation, and then moving forward and continually moving forward.
And Delvin, just picking up on that point then, what emerging cyber risks should brokers be aware of, and how can they prepare their clients for such challenges?
Yeah, I think it's difficult because the threat landscape changes all the time, and we are seeing things with AI. But I think one of the good things with AI in terms of attacks, you can use it to defend as well. So that's also one of the positives that come out of it. I think also from the future, which is probably a lot further on in the horizon, is quantum computing and what that means when it comes to encryption that we have today. Because with quantum computing comes the ability to work with large mathematical algorithms and numbers to be able to break encryption codes. So there's worry about people harvesting data now and then decrypting it later on. So that's another area of concern for the future. So it feels like it's a never-ending race.
My goodness. So Delvin, what should brokers take away from this? Any top tips?
Yeah, some of the top tips that I can think of would probably be understanding their client's business, making sure they understand what their client's cyber maturity looks like in order to put the best terms forward for their clients when it comes to purchasing insurance.
Jake, what about you? Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I think it's a really exciting time. And the fact we can use AI on both sides here, and like I always imagine fire is actually used to fight fire. That's how we're also moving towards with technology. I don't think quantum computing is going to be a threat for at least another decade, but it's definitely something to be thinking of now. And that's something that I think has been the problem with, say, cyber insurance. We haven't really worried about it until, we're a bit too late. So there's no time like the present. So if anyone hasn't got insurance or doesn't fully understand their own business and their protection, then there's no time like the present.
My goodness, I could actually stay and chat to the both of you all day. There's just so many layers to all of this. It's fascinating. Yeah. Delvin and Jake, it's been great speaking to both of you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us here on Insurance Tomorrow.
And you, thank you.
No worries, great to meet you.
So with that in mind, we'll bring this cyber risk episode of Insurance Tomorrow to a close. Massive thank you to Delvin Tillett, who's head of cyber at Allianz Commercial, and also to Jake Moore, who's global cyber security advisor at ESET. Thank you both for joining us. And thank you also for tuning in. And don't forget, you can subscribe through your normal podcast app so you'll never have to miss an episode. And while you're there, why not leave us a review? We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, see you soon.